Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Best You interview series. It's Gary here, and as always, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank you very, very much for tuning in. And today, I'm delighted to be joined by Salena Rochester, who is here to discuss her incredible journey in life that was the catalyst for the creation of her own production company, which we'll get to here in a wee bit. Salena is the founder and CEO of Purple Moon Pictures. As a Peabody Award-winning producer and writer, she has a strong passion for telling dynamic stories, and Salena also writes and produces film and television projects through Purple Moon Pictures, where she is working with top studio and production companies to bring projects to life. With more than a decade of television experience as a network executive with NBC Universal, Salena has cultivated strong relationships within the creative and selling community, while also being adept at developing and producing documentaries, true crime, and unscripted lifestyle programming. And some of her credits include The Real Housewives of Atlanta, Married to Medicine, Million Dollar Listing, and Peacock's multi-award winning documentary, The Rebellious Life of Mrs. Rosa Parks. Salena holds a master's degree in film and television production from American University and a BA in political science from Hampton University. Wow, quite the bio there, Salena. Thank you very, very much for coming on the show today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to talk and be here.
Yeah, me too. Me too. So let's start in terms of becoming a successful female producer and CEO in the entertainment industry. What are some of the biggest challenges that you've personally faced? And on top of that, what advice would you give to other women aspiring to follow in similar footsteps?
I mean, that's a great question. I would say, a lot of the challenges, at least in the beginning of my career, was just self-doubt, not, recognizing my own talent, and my ability to get to that, high level. I started my career as an assistant at NBC Universal, and at the time, there was the assistant level. And then it shot up to the vice president. So for me in my mind, I was like, well, how do I go from assistant to vice president? Like, you just don't, no one does that. There has to be a trajectory. But I knew I wanted to do it. And so for me, I just sort of looked at like what the job responsibilities of a vice president was. And in my mind, I said, that's what I need to be, even as an assistant. Yes, I'm answering calls. Yes, I'm running to grab coffee. But in between times, I'm going to do what a vice president does so that I can prove to those that I can do that job. And so I always recommend to, young people coming into whatever industry you work at, whether it's a corporate industry, whether it's, a small business, look at the position that you want and do that and be that. And then eventually you'll find your way towards that position, which ended up happening for me.
Yeah, that's fantastic. It's amazing visioning, to say, fairly earlier in your career, this is where I want to go, and then taking the action to say, and these are the steps that I think I need to take to get there. Was that completely off your own back to do that, or did someone say, if that's what you want, you need to try and figure out how to get there? How did that come about?
A little bit of both, I think. I do remember getting advice from someone saying, it's a famous quote of, do the job you want, not the job you have. So that
Right.
was always sort of like swirling in my head. And then, when I got to the network and realized, I was like, okay, there's a big jump. I like I went online and I Googled vice president of like NBC Universal, like the exact position, found the job description. And, it's bulleted out there for what you have to do. And
Yeah.
so that's how I work. Like the things that I didn't know how to do, I would learn. I was like, well, I need to learn to do this. The things that I did know how to do, I was like, well, let me do it better and, continue growing off of that. So it was a little bit of both, a little bit of my own like ingenuity and just listening to the advice of others.
Yeah, it's so fascinating that we're talking about this right now. I'm teaching a university class here in Calgary, and it's about career strategies and essentially just providing them with some foundational understanding of things that they could do that would serve them, going forward, especially when they are looking to approach their career with intention and then, manifest the success that they have and compound that to greater heights as they go forward. And a lot of what you just said there is essentially the message and the essence of do your homework, go in there with intention, learn, lead, take action that maybe other people aren't taking, give yourself that differentiating factor. So I can't wait till we get this published, and then I can just say to the folks, make sure you pay attention to this one because this is living, breathing proof that it actually genuinely works as well. So I'm really happy that you said that, and of course it did work. So then, having spent the time that you spent at NBC Universal, and then obviously building your own production company, relationships was part of the bio that I just discussed there. How did you go about cultivating initially and then maintaining strong relationships within the community that would ultimately support your, entrepreneurial endeavor as you go forward? Any key strategies that you had in that mix?
Yeah, I would say definitely networking. That's just a rule of the trade in any trade, anywhere you work. It's important to know people who are at your level, people who are above your level, even people who are below your level. Like I never turned my nose down to like the interns or the PAs who were coming up. If a PA wanted to do an informational, I 100% did it. Even to this day, I still meet with people, as well as seeking out those above me and then those on my level. And you want to have these sort of like informationals, as what they're called. At a time when you don't necessarily need something. I'm not looking for a job. I'm not looking to get promoted. I just want to know you and build that relationship. And then that way, when a time comes where you may need something, you can go to them as already having that a relationship rather than like, hey, can I get to know you? And also, so that was always important for me. Like I made a point to just get to know people, like all sorts of people. And then following up is also really key. A lot of times, and this is something I actually learned as I became an executive, there would be times where like an intern or even someone else, would set an informational with me. And then 3 months later, they would send a follow up email. Hey, just want to let you know this is what's going on with me and like keep me updated on them. And that way, their name and who they are were always sort of swirling in my head so that when an opportunity came up, I'd be like, oh, I remember that girl who said and then you can make the connection. So then I started doing that. And like, even now, I'll just like, I send holiday cards like to a lot of like the high level executives that I've, worked with over the years, just to keep my name in their inbox, nothing more than happy holidays, happy new year. And, it keeps you sort of always relevant. You always want to stay on the minds of those that you find to be who could really help you, in whatever your career is.
Yeah, and vice versa. You could help them as well.
Exactly. And that's actually happening a lot now because, I'm not sure how aware you are, sorry, all that noise, but the entertainment industry is sort of like in flux right now, at least the US entertainment industry. Hollywood is trying to reset itself and figure out how to make a business model that makes sense in the world of streaming. And so a lot of people are out of work. A lot of people are like struggling with what to do next. And there are
Mhm.
so many executives that I really respected over the years that are now reaching out to me for, opportunities. And it's interesting. It's very surreal, but I mean, that's sort of like what you always have to be prepared for.
Yeah, you just never know. You never know what's going to happen at any point. I used to say that a lot in class in terms of essentially stakeholder engagement, which would be an add-on or almost a summary of networking at large, is if you decide to create a stakeholder matrix or something, say on a project and all the key stakeholders that are involved, and then through whatever process of deduction, you say these are the ones I'm really going to concentrate on, and these are the ones that I'm just going to leave alone. They'll just get what they get, and they'll behave how they behave. Just be careful because people get hired and fired and promoted and demoted, and someone you purposely decided to ignore at some point could suddenly become the key sponsor or stakeholder for your project. So you want to be doing everything that you can do with intention. And back to the networking, I loved what you said there because it sounds like something that's really natural for you to do. Very personable person. You'll give people the time if and when you can, and do what you're doing there. And it means different things to different people. Networking, that is. In terms of some people, it would be a face-to-face meeting. Some people, it would be a walk around the block. Some people, it would be a gift, sorry, not a gift card, a holiday card or something like that to get them there. In terms of networking, how intentional are you about the process that you follow for networking?
It really depends. If it's, I tend to like networking events. That's sort of my thing because it's lots of people and I can sort of like move around and talk to different people versus like having to sustain an entire conversation. Like,
Yeah.
as personable as I am, like the idea of like doing lunches and coffees or like, especially with someone that I'm not that, familiar with, it's just like, oh gosh, like now I have to really like carry the conversation. Luckily, I'm good
Yeah.
at, keeping a conversation going. But for me, I tend to look for industry network events. So I'll join clubs and or newsletters, that have to do with like industry stuff. And oftentimes they'll have, a happy hour or just like a meet and greets or even the conferences are actually at conferences and film festivals for me in entertainment are a great opportunity to just go and meet and you just walk around and you talk to people. I actually prefer to go alone. I've used to bring plus ones a lot, but you get distracted with the person you know and the person you're comfortable with. And oftentimes you find yourself having a glass of wine, observing everyone versus being a part of it. So I will go alone if it's like a really big networking event where I think I can meet a lot of people and I just work the room as best I can.
Yeah, yeah, I love it. I love it. So you've worked on a variety of projects, some that I mentioned during the intro there. What steps do you take to ensure, or do you take steps to ensure diversity and inclusion in the projects that you're doing? And if so, why is that important to you?
Yes, 100% on all of the shows that I worked on, especially when I was at the network level, because unfortunately, there weren't a lot of other people who looked like me who worked at the network. And whether they value diversity inclusion, they sometimes there just wasn't an emphasis or an importance put on it because when you're hiring for a show, you tend to go with the people that you know, whether it's like friends and or colleagues that you've worked with a lot of times. And because we live in, like a socially segregated world, you tend to hang out with people who have a similar cultural background as you or whatever. So it's sort of like that does like bleed over into the work environment, and the people getting hired often are those that have that personal relationship with people. So when I got into a position of power where I was able to hire, or I would say a position of hiring, I always made a point to ensure that I had as much diverse candidates as possible, especially in the reality space, because a lot of my shows, some of my shows had all Black casts, some of them didn't, but the ones that had an all Black cast, you want to make sure the people who are telling those women's stories know and understand, their story on a deeper level. We're all story makers. So,
Yeah,
my white colleagues could tell these women's stories as well because they understand, love and divorce and parenthood and all that. But, someone who truly understands that story could just pick out things, a little bit deeper. So I always made a point to ensure that I was finding people of color to, give them more opportunities and not even really also LGBTQ as well. It's not always just like DEI isn't just people of color. It's just, people who are often overlooked in
yeah,
situations.
yeah. Did you ever receive resistance to that as you were maneuvering through, or were you lucky enough to be left alone because people trusted your creativity?
No, I received a lot of resistance
Really?
actually. Yeah, it was disappointing, and this was sort of before, the Me Too slash like racial reckoning, I call it in the country around, 2021 and all
Mm.
that time where people were having like a conscious awakening. But before that, there was one particular show I worked on, all Black cast, and the production company was great. Production company owners just never hired Black crew members at all. And I remember the very first time I realized that I was coming on set as an executive. And as an executive, you are the most important person on set. But
Right.
I remember just feeling a little like uncomfortable in my skin because oftentimes, no matter what position I have, me being the most important person, I walk into every room as a Black woman.
Yeah.
And, there was just like no one who looked like me, outside of the cast. And I was like, this is uncomfortable. And then I started thinking about our cast. I was like, our cast works with the crew every single day, and they come to work and there's no one who looks like them. And so on the next season, when it was time to hire, I expressed this, and to the company owners as well as my counterparts. And it was just like, yeah, well, we try and we can't find anyone. That's always sort of the answer. We can't find people. And I'm like, what do you mean? There are a lot of people. And so
Yeah.
that pushed me to I created like a database, and I went out and I started meeting with every producer. I don't care what, level you're at, but like someone who could do the job. And then I would present. I was like, well, there's this person. But then I'd be like, oh, but they haven't done this type of show. Or like, there was always a reason not to do it. And it was frustrating. And this was like year after year after year. My voice was never heard. Maybe they would give me like a PA or like an associate producer, which is a lower level, which is great. But it's like, you want to have a person in a position of power who's making decisions.
Yeah.
And then, around 2021 and two, when like the racial reckoning started, being more relevant and people were really demanding to see people of color behind the camera, I went again. It was like another season. We're starting to hire, and it was my same old tired song. And at this point, I was luckily I was able to use I was like, look what's going on. You
Yeah.
guys are gonna regret it. It's like we
Yeah.
need
Yeah.
to hire. And then that's finally when it's like, okay, fine, Salena. And I got a co-EP that year, which was good, a woman of color, and she was amazing. She definitely was able to relate to the women in a way that other co-EPs weren't in the past. And then the following year, we ended up getting, because then it became like a network mandate. Well, actually, it was a network mandate, but then there's also a financial incentive given to production companies to hire people of color. And I was
Ah,
like, it was a good thing, but it was also disappointing that it like takes money to
yeah.
get like these decisions made. But yeah, it was a fight. And we had those few golden years of people of color being given the opportunity, and people of color and women, I will say. And now, unfortunately, it seems like we're dipping back down, where it's like, all of these DEI heads are getting fired, the DEI programs are, being dismantled, and those who were hired during these golden years are finding themselves back in the same position of not getting hired, but at least they have the experience. So I think it's just always going to be a fight. Honestly, the DEI struggle will never end.
Yeah. That's really too bad. Yeah, and it's interesting in terms of how corporate land. I mean, there's nothing wrong with, focusing attention and time and effort and energy and resources to a specific topic and then saying, right, okay, we've plateaued and then we'll do something else that's now part of the norm, or we don't need to do it anymore, or whatever that looks like. But when it comes to something like DEI, if indeed there's a genuine effort to just regress from all the work that's been done, that's a worry. That's disappointing at best. I say that, I'm kind of laughing when I say that because it's just ludicrous to even think that organizations would intentionally say, cool, did that. We don't need to do that anymore. Let's move on.
That's
Well, that's a
exactly
worry.
what's happening. And yeah, it's disappointing. It's like, it's like, oh my gosh, like as much progress as we made, there's as much, like you said, intention to go backwards. And,
Mhm.
like
Yeah.
piece of the pie for everybody. But
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Exactly. So balancing multiple high profile projects and running a production company and that must be incredibly demanding on your time. How do you approach maintaining balance, having as healthy as possible a lifestyle in such a hectic schedule? And like do you have any tips and tricks for the listeners that they could adopt that would help them in their busy professional lives?
yeah, I would say it's hard. It's like I haven't
Yeah.
mastered it. But I try to do one thing a week that's just for me, like whether it'll take 15 minutes or an hour out of my day, but something that I know that I enjoy. And it could be just sitting outside in my backyard, just like reading a book, because I barely have time to, and I used to love reading, but who has
Mm.
time to like sit and read a book nowadays?
Yeah.
But like that, I'll give time for myself to read. If I'm lucky, I'll give myself, at least a full 30 minutes to work out, do a Pilates workout. But just you have to find time. And people are always saying, well, there is no time, but there is time. If
Yeah.
you intentionally wake up in the morning and say, I'm going to do this thing, and you find the time, and then you go on with the rest of your day, at the end of the night, you're not going to go to yourself, oh my God, I can't believe I took that 15 minutes to read that book. Like, you're going to
Yeah.
feel good about the 15 minutes.
Yeah.
You just got to find that time. Start small and then work
Yeah.
your way up.
Yeah, do something that works for you within your schedule, within your geographic location, within your interest, physical capabilities and such. It's very interesting you say that, Selena, because whenever I'm chatting, with clients, coaching clients, or friends, colleagues, whomever it is I'm chatting with, and the line they use is, "I don't have the time." And I'll kind of do this little interrupting thing where I'm like, "You don't make the time. It's a different word." And they're like, "No, I don't have the time." And I'm like, "Nope, you don't make the time. Is what's happening here." Because you're right. There's opportunity everywhere to steal, if I could say that, and that's probably a negative connotation on your time management skills, but to use time for yourself, understand the benefit, understand what you're hoping to get, putting your head on the pillow at night saying, "Hey, I'm ace. Look what I did for myself today." And no one skipped a beat. Everything else got done. No one truly missed me. I wasn't multitasking when I was doing it because it was appropriate to the circumstance and occasion, and trying to get people to think along the lines of, there is no time to I didn't make the time, and not to beat themselves up. That I don't mean it to do that, but just to give them a different paradigm, a different reference point to say you get to choose. And if you can't within 24 hours pick 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes to just do something that serves you, you're kind of on a slippery slope to being able to serve other people as you move forward, because there will be a decline of some description in your health and your wealth. And I mean wealth in every sort of context, and not just financial wealth, to be able to do actually what it is you're trying to do over time. So it's good that you have that intention, and I'm feeling a real intention feel to a lot of the conversation that we've had today. So going on a more personal note, as someone who has faced significant personal tragedy and emerged to being the flourishing individual that you are now, how do you inspire your family, specifically your son, to pursue his dreams? And if you don't mind, maybe giving a wee bit of a backstory as to what I'm talking about here, so that people know what that looks like. And then in terms of the inspiration, how do what values do you emphasize to him about life, career, being and such?
Yeah. Yes. So, you know, losing someone who's very close to you is very difficult. I lost my husband, who was, my college sweetheart. We met at 18, and he unfortunately passed away at 32 from cancer. And it was devastating. It's like it's not something you think about that, could happen. Of course, like we all have these
Yeah.
morbid thoughts every once in a while, but it's something that I remember when it first happened, I just thought, how am I going to get through this? Like emotionally, I don't know how I'm going to get through this. And I remember writing, when he got to the point where he had to enter into hospice, had to like take time off of work. And I was busy career, working my way up the corporate ladder. Luckily, the people on my team were those who knew about it were supportive. But I remember writing, my little exit sort of email to everyone, because in my mind, I didn't know if I would survive losing him. And
Yeah.
so I wanted to write, like, and even though I was taking a leave of absence, it was sort of like a goodbye to everybody, because I went into it thinking I could lose my mind, and who knows like who I'm going to be on the other side of this. I might end up, moving to Timbuktu. Like I had no idea, what my physical and emotional reaction would be to his loss. And, he did, of course, pass away, and it was extremely difficult and emotional, but I got up and I had to pick it up and I had to continue going. I couldn't like lay in bed and just and be overcome with sadness, even though I did and I had those days, but I had my son, and I thank God for him, because he is the person who motivated me. It's like, okay, this is a very difficult thing, but you still have to keep moving. You have to take care of him.
Yeah.
Have gotten to a certain point in your career, just keep building, keep working, keep moving towards that. And it helped keep me a bit grounded from like, sort of like go losing it completely. But I think for him, it just showed like, you can have terrible things happen to you, but they don't have to completely wipe you out. Like you can overcome it. And I was surprised myself too at how strong I was. I didn't realize that. I was like, wow, I can go through that and still, at the end of the day, move forward and find joy again, thrive in my career. We were living in New York at the time, and I decided to pack us all up and well, pack me and him up and move to the West Coast to LA. Luckily, my office, my job had a LA office and a New York office. But I moved all the way out to Los Angeles, with him alone. And I was like, we're just going to start a new life and figure it out. And we did. Like, I had zero idea. I remember getting on that plane. I was like, I have no idea what's to come from this, and
Yeah.
greatness came. I moved to the LA office. I kept working. I kept, um, coming up with, ideas for what I wanted for the future. And he was there beside me, and he's still beside me, watching everything. And it's inspirational because I know that when he becomes an adult, he's going to look back on this and he's going to see and he's going to understand sort of like the struggle. I don't think he fully understands it now, but I know everything that I'm doing now is going to have a huge impact on who he is as a man.
Yeah.
And that's what really like keeps me going and keeps me motivated. I'm just looking at his photo right now. It's like he's going to be a strong man one day who will look back on his mom and be like, oh, if she can do that, if she could get through that, I can get through whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Absolutely amazing. Yeah, it's the ultimate, what would you say, mentorship, if you like, knowing that they're watching, they're observing, they're obviously living, feeling, and experiencing it at the same time in their own way, but also observing you, taking your lead and seeing how and why you react in a certain way and trying to puzzle it out and trying to figure that sort of stuff out at the same time. And they're literal sponges, every single day. And I often I would catch myself now and again when my son was a little bit younger, even today, actually, just in terms of, is that is that the way that I want to be? Is that the way that I want to reflect this interaction? Is that the way that I want to open a conversation or close a conversation or be supportive or helpful? And sometimes I recognize that after the fact and I'm kind of like, oh, whoops, then I have an opportunity to sit them down and say, that was not my best self. That was not what I intended, but there was just a lot more. I've used the word quite a lot today, but a lot more intention. And my state of being. And it sounds like the same for you, doing what you're doing for your family and ensuring that you're still getting what you need because that's important for him to see as well. Because if you completely neglect yourself, then you're, if I could say like a lesser version of what you would want to be for him. And how does that motivate, affect, and inspire him to say, I don't need to try. I could just do what my mum did, which is just kind of veg out and take a different path. So it's absolutely inspirational. And I purposefully wanted to kind of wrap up the interview today, Selena, with that rather than opening with it, to give people just to make sure that they got to know who you are today, and then layer in the obvious and devastating life experiences that you've gone through. I've absolutely thoroughly enjoyed having you on the show today. Before we end up today, where can people find you and find out a little bit more about your production company?
you can find me on Instagram. It's Salena Rock, SalenaRoc. And also LinkedIn, LinkedIn. And I have a website, purplemoonpictures.com, which, tells you everything you need to know about my production company and what I do.
Wonderful. Excellent. Selena, thank you very, very much for taking the time. I thoroughly, thoroughly enjoyed our conversation today.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And I really enjoyed our convo as well.
Hello again. Thanks again for tuning in to this episode, and I do hope that you found it valuable and gained some insights. I do have an ask for you. If you enjoyed this podcast, I would absolutely love it if you would connect with me on my socials, and that's at LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube. Just search for my name and do whatever it is you need to do there to follow me and stay updated with all the latest content, tips, and discussions. And for any more resources that you're looking for, feel free to visit my website, garygillen.com. gmail.com. And while you're there, you can book a free, no obligation 30-minute coaching call directly with me through the site. Whether you're looking to enhance your performance or tackle a new challenge, I'm absolutely here to help you succeed, and I would absolutely love to hear from you. Thanks very much again, and until next time, keep pushing towards your goals and getting better each and every day, my friend.